Anyway, to the uninitiated, the different category titles can seem baffling, whereas dweebs like me just like hearing them being discussed. That's why we're going to run through them, starting with this one.
Platformer, a game in which a player-controlled character jumps between suspended platforms in order to reach a goal.
OK, easy start. Everyone knows what a platform game is, apart from maybe dead people. Arguably, the first platform game was Nintendo's Donkey Kong in 1982, in which Mario, known then only as Jumpman, had to jump over barrels and prance between girders in order to impress a lady. At their best, trad platform games were essentially little living cartoons, sometimes explicitly so, as in Tiny Toon Adventures here, or Ken-chan and Kato-chan, a weirdly scatological title for the PC Engine with an odd emphasis on blowing off and turds and toilets and farts. Platformers have also been a good launchpad for characters such as Sonic the Hedgehog, seen here rolling at high speed through a jolly cartoon world just like real hedgehogs don't. But it's Mario who's the undisputed king bitch in platform prison, appearing in addictive, brilliantly designed games like Super Mario Bros. 1 and 3, the groundbreaking Super Mario 64, which brought the third dimension to platform games with stunning confidence, and most recently the downright psychedelic Super Mario Galaxy titles.
Shoot 'em up, a game in which the player avoids attacks while shooting enemies, usually in 2 dimensions.
Shoot 'em ups, or shmups for short, range from the famous Spartan killing grounds of Space Invaders to the cartoonish idiocy of Parodius. Shoot 'em ups aren't as big as they used to be, although they still have a hardcore following amongst masochistic maniacs who actively enjoy dipping into titles like Perfect Cherry Blossom, which sort of resembles a firework display being sick. At any rate, shoot 'em ups are not to be confused with the following.
First-person shooter, a 3D weapon-based combat game viewed from the protagonist's vantage point.
Yes, shooting people in the face is something that never truly loses its magic. The earliest first-person games for the home were basic flick-screen affairs such as 3D Monster Maze on the ZX81, the first 3D game for any home computer, and it was surprisingly frightening despite its Spartan visuals and complete lack of sound. And it was scary partly because at the time, seeing through the eyes of your character was a total novelty. Consequently, this man really believes he is in the maze, that the dinosaur really is after him. Don't you? Ugh, I'm a dinosaur, you wuss! Of course, the other thing that made 3D Monster Maze scary is that, unlike me, Pussy Boy here doesn't have a gun to defend himself with. No, he'd have to wait at least 10 years for that until the Nazis invaded. Suck it. No, don't. Yes, skip forward a decade and Wolfenstein 3D turns up on the PC. It was groundbreaking in its day for its fast-paced, dark humour and extreme violence, including a bit where you got to kill Hitler. Of course, now it's so flippin' basic you can get it on the iPhone, where ironically it's so engrossing you won't notice people sneaking up behind you and shooting you in their head. But if Wolfenstein was the pioneer, the following year Doom became the populariser. It placed the action in a unique gothic sci-fi environment, and it was gorier, and most importantly of all, it had atmosphere. It may look like a simple bang-bang shooty affair, but in fact, above all, Doom was terrifying, like a horror movie. From there on in, a torrent of first-person shooters erupted, including stone-cold classics like GoldenEye and the sprawling sci-fi loveliness of the Halo series.
Simulation, computerised recreation of a real-world activity.
One of the very first Sims was Atari's eerie impersonal Battlezone, a tank simulator in which you hovered through a wireframe environment murdering blameless tanks. Flight sims have always been popular, albeit bewilderingly complex, and they're another good example of how graphics have evolved. The term simulation, or sim, covers everything from obvious applications like a flight sim or a racing game, to more esoteric examples, like the grisly surgical slice-em-up trauma centre Second Opinion on the Wii.
Doctor!
Other sims include the thrilling domestic drudgery of The Sims or the tranquil rural boredom of this farming simulator, which brings the excitement of being a f***ing Wurzel kicking and screaming into your computer.
Strategy, a game which tests the player's tactical decision-making skills.
Popular strategy games include cerebral titles like Civilization, in which you conquer the planet either militarily or culturally, and more action-oriented fare like the microscopic killing fields of Command & Conquer. Strategy games are brilliant if you love plans and planning. If you're basically a little armchair Hitler, I don't like them.
Puzzle game, a game involving a puzzle.
The inherently satisfying slot-em-up Tetris is the best-known puzzler, but there's also an intriguing new breed that experiments with other gaming forms to mind-expanding effect. Games like the challenging Portal, in which you have to play with physics and spatial awareness, or even platform puzzles, courtesy of the insanely clever time-meddling indie game Braid.
RPG or role-playing game, an interactive narrative with the emphasis on exploration in which the player's character develops over the course of time.
Role-playing games like Final Fantasy are massive time sponges, basically, in which you spend hours building up characters and going on epic quests.
MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, a virtual environment in which large numbers of players may interact with each other.
This is your World of Warcraft online fantasy world type thing, which soaks up hours of your time as you run around pretending you're an archmage or a bloody lion monster or some such shit. I've never really understood the appeal of these MMORPGs myself, but then I hate people enough in the real world, let alone bothering to enter a second made-up universe to learn to despise them all over again.
Adventure game, an interactive narrative in which the player assumes the role of the protagonist.
Early adventures may not have been much to look at, but they were incredibly entertaining. The Infocom Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, written by Douglas Adams, is still possibly the funniest game ever made, honestly. The point-and-click adventure, such as the excellent Monkey Island here, is another great lost gaming genre. Traditional computer adventure games, which are basically a series of puzzles linked by a plot, have fallen out of favour in recent years, which is a terrible pity, if you ask me.
Casual games, video games aimed at novice players, often scarcely considered traditional games at all.
Right now, casual games are probably the most rapidly expanding sector of the gaming market, and it's largely thanks to little magi sticks like these. Ooh. I'm not a huge fan of the Wii, largely because sitting around on my sofa flapping my arms around isn't my idea of entertainment. Although it does make some games, such as the brightly coloured Cooking Mama here, accessible to newcomers, because you're performing actions rather than jabbing a complex array of buttons. Of course, the next step is to remove the buttons and controllers completely. Witness Project Natal from Microsoft, in which the controller is you. Here we see the outright creepy promotional video for Project Natal, in which it seems you have to sort of groom a boy called Milo.
Hiya Milo, how you doing?
Hi Claire, you okay?
Actually, I'm a bit nervous.
You? Nervous? I don't believe it.
Presumably instead of a high score table there's some sort of offenders register.
You've got to put these goggles on.
Goggles?
As computers and consoles grow ever more powerful and the games market grows ever more diverse, so there's an increasing number of games that fit about 10 categories at once or none. For instance, how do you define the bizarre wind-em-up flower in which you control a breeze blowing petals around? Or the serene safari photography game Africa? There are countless pacifist titles out there, but the broadcast media tends to ignore them in favour of highlighting more violent fare.
Beat 'em up, simulated combat game in which the player leathers the stuffing out of people.
Now, beat 'em ups may look like a simple exercise in just knocking the shit out of someone, but actually they're at least 4% more complicated than that. Physically harming your fellow man has been a staple feature of video games since before they could adequately portray the brutal reality of unarmed combat. To an onlooker, an over-the-top bloodthirsty beat 'em up such as Mortal Kombat here might seem unnecessarily violent. That's because it is.
Johnny Cage wins.
SANDBOX or open world game, a game in which the player is left free to explore a virtual world in non-linear fashion.
Sandbox games are massive modern playsets, basically. Huge environments in which you can do what you like. They started back in the day with the epic space exploration and trading simulation Elite. Elite gave the impression of containing an entire functioning universe, but actually that was an illusion. Computers weren't that powerful back then. Instead, the thousands of planets and solar systems the player could explore were generated by a clever series of algorithms. Modern computers really are powerful enough to contain complete worlds, as in the nihilistic, almost overpoweringly detailed Grand Theft Auto series. GTA's Liberty City is a living city filled with working roads and buildings and bridges and rivers. It has its own transport system and police force. It's got radio and TV stations. It plays host to thousands of independent citizens driving thousands of vehicles, or strutting the pavements, or getting run over, or innocently driving their taxis into the gun sights of a maniac who shoots them rather unfairly in the head, then sits waiting in case there's a passenger who panics and get out. Yeah, hang on, wait a minute. Yeah, there she is. And then he picks her off as well.
Rhythm action game, loose musical simulation in which the player must perform actions in time to music in order to succeed.
Musical games were first popularised in the late 90s by the hallucinatory Parappa the Rapper for the PlayStation. There's been a huge explosion in rhythm action games recently, thanks to the success of Guitar Hero and Rock Band, with the Fab Four joining the ride with the release of the Beatles' Rock Band spin-off. The release of the Beatles Rock Band game is a true watershed moment for video games because it's probably got the biggest crossover appeal of any game ever, apart from that one where you push smiling class in the canal, which unfortunately I've just made up. The idea is that you, yes you, seize control of the Beatles and strum, bash or warble your way through their entire musical career, from their stompy origins in the Cavern Club through to their rooftop swan song. To take part, as well as the game itself, you'll need one of the guitar controllers or the drum kit or a microphone, or preferably all of the above. It's really designed to be played by 4 people at once, and if you are playing on your own, for God's sake, don't let anyone walk in and catch you, because there's no way you can strum a plastic guitar and maintain your dignity. Anyway, the game mechanics will be familiar to anyone who's played Rock Band or Guitar Hero. You have to hit the notes at the right time as they flow down the centre of the screen there. I think that's basically what proper musicians see in their heads as they play. Do it right and it all sounds good, mess it up and it all starts to sound pretty bad.